Well, hello everyone, and happy Wednesday. Thank you for joining us for our midweek study in the book of Daniel. And we are making some progress. We are in chapter 7. This is the last chapter that is written in Aramaic. And it's helpful to know that as we start looking at some of the words, but just points out the uniqueness of this book of Daniel that, as you remember, it starts out in Hebrew for the first two chapters, then it switches to Aramaic up through chapter 7, and then it goes back to Hebrew and finishes off the book in the Hebrew language. So again, very interesting. No one really has any answers as to why that occurred in such a way, but we're going to notice just a few interesting things as we go through the language. Um, Chapter 7 is where Daniel's dreams become increasingly difficult to interpret. Um, just upfront clarity here. I am not well versed in these type of prophetic understandings. There are people who have devoted their entire lives to trying to interpret this, understand this for thousands of years. And so it's somewhat mystical, somewhat elusive, many different ideas and takes on how to interpret this. I just plan to go lightly through it with what the Jewish sages have to say about it, and then we'll come back and look at some of the individual words and see if we can gain any enhanced meaning because it's very figurative, very imaginative, and it just has a lot of strange things that are not easy for us to understand. So, with all of that prefacing this, let's jump into chapter 7. On your screen, you'll see a scan from the JPS Jewish Bible, and it starts out, Daniel is somewhat speaking, but what we're going to notice here is his first two verses are written in the third person. So it starts out in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. Very weird kind of description here, visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. So this is written in the third person. So who is, someone's writing this about Daniel. And then we get to the second verse. It said, goes, Daniel spoke and said, I saw in my vision by night. So we just wonder, is Daniel relating this to a scribe who is taking these notes? And somehow we have to, understand how it goes from the third person into the first person. And then Daniel starts either reciting it, or it's very interesting, or maybe he had a scribe start this for him, and then he took over with the writings. But a very definite switch here from the third person to the first person. So Daniel says, I saw in my vision by night, four winds of heaven broke forth upon the great sea, and four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse from one another. The first was like a lion, had eagle's wings, and then suddenly the wings were taken and plucked off, and was lifted up from the earth and made to stand upon 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Okay, just incredible uh, imagery here. So we're going to just take a pause there for a moment and see that the sages speak that these monstrous forms, some had suggested that in some of the ancient Assyrian and Babylonian monuments, there were these mythological type forms. We see them in many of the Asian cultures. Of dragons and mythological imagery of beasts that represent dominion and conquest. And so then they start looking at the term of a lion representing Babylon, eagle's wings, allusion to the swiftness of Babylon's attacks. Um, they say that some of the excavations currently that have been done at Nimrud in Babylon saw winged lions that were excavated. So very, very interesting. But some of the things that I want to just point out here are some words that are very interesting that this beast had a man's heart given to it. Of course, they draw a parallel here to the story that we had just started going through, where Nebuchadnezzar, who was a man, of course, was now changed and was given a beast's heart, and he lived in the wild for that period of 7 years, and then his persona, his mind came back to him, or his heart came back to him. So they see kind of a reference here. They talk about the heart being the form of intelligence. So with that, we're just going to take a pause here and look at what these images could be. Of course, the internet has no limit to the amount of imagery you can find. Many people have done paintings, have tried to create what they felt was being portrayed in this story of Daniel. And so here you see a painting of some images. Of course, you see in the front the lion with the Okay, we're back. Somehow we got cut off. Apologize for that. Um, you see the imagery here of the lion with the wings. You see the bear with the teeth in it. In its teeth, you see these things that are supposed to be like ribs. You see a very fearful uh, beast in the background with horns and teeth, and you see a leopard with 4 heads and numerous sets of wings. So very, very strange things going on here. Um, let's just go slowly, take a look at the uh, Bible itself on what it says. And there's some very, very interesting words here. And so we see in verse 1, this is the interlinear from Bible Hub. And as we go to verse 2, we see Daniel was looking. He saw the vision upon his head. It was at nighttime. The sea was stirring up. I want to take a look at this word for stirring up. And it's saying that it was like breaking forth. I think that's a very interesting word to look at and try to get the image of what did Daniel see. Obviously, there are not enough words um, that he can describe what you see in your dreams, and the fact that he's able to, remember these dreams and be able to comment on it with enough verbiage to communicate what, first of all, God wanted us to hear. And that's the challenge as we look through these dreams, because you look at it in the simple reading as trying to imagine what he saw, but then there's another level, actually numerous levels. There can be a level of what it could mean for Daniel at that time. And that's a lot how the Jewish sages will take a look at this. They will try to apply it to the time political climate that Daniel was living in, and who does it reference to? You have the Babylonians, you have the Medes, you have the Persians, and how did it relate to them at that time frame? Then you have a deeper level, a more mystical level, saying, okay, was this dream just intended to tell what's going on in that current time? Or is there a prophetic voice to it? Is there something that's yet to come? Is there something that did it occur, in the first millennial period? Did it occur sometime between first millennial and where we are today in the second millennial? Or is it yet to come in the future? And so this is where um, volumes of books are written. So many people who are much more intelligent than I am have dissected this and tried to give their interpretation of what this meaning is. And so basically that's well beyond the scope of what I'm able to do. But if we can just glean a few things, maybe from is there something that the Aramaic language can teach us that maybe is somewhat lost in the translation from the Aramaic to the English? And that's kind of where I feel, at least I have the most ability to take us at this time. So again, we have the beast. They were very fearful. We saw the lion with wings, and an eagle watched him, and then the wings were plucked off. Well, mm, that must have been a frightening thought to see these wings plucked off of this lion. And so we look at this word merat, and it means to make bare, to polish, to skewer, to pull off. So like a stripping of it. Again, I'm not sure just what would have entailed. This was a living creature. Was it bloody? Was it ugly? Or were they suddenly just removed and there was none of that Hollywood gore and guts associated with it? It was just a removal to signify something that was a flying creature and then could not fly afterwards. You kind of see a transition coming here of this lion um, morphing into something from a winged creature into more of a standing creature, because it says here that it stood on 2 feet like a man, and it had a heart given to it. And this is where these this portion captured me, and so I wanted to share a little bit of what these words um, were taken here. So let's take a look at the word hakimat, which is to stand, and it comes from the word kum. Just a quick reference here, those of you that are familiar with the New Testament, and you read where Jesus performed the miracle of raising the little girl from the dead. The New Testament will preserve his Aramaic words that he used, and he will use the word kum, Tabitha, arise. And so here you see this word kum means to arise, and it's the same word used here in Daniel. So just interesting to see that comparison being made. So this uh, image of this lion was made to stand, rose up, it kum, rose up, and ulavav, a heart, was given, and a heart of a man. So it has the word in Nash here, which is in the Hebrew and in the Aramaic, there's numerous words for man. Um, in English, it's always translated man, but the Hebrew and Aramaic gives us a little bit of a clue um, as to what type of person this man was. So this word in Nash talks about a man with the concept of being frail or mortal. It is emphasizing his mortality and his frailty. So it's kind of interesting. We don't always catch that. There are other words that are used to describe a man who is very valiant, very strong, very bold. And then there's a word for man that's used to describe a very wicked type man, a Baal. Here, the word Anash is used to talk about its this person's frailty. And so, what's happening here is this beast, which was, of course, thought to be very strong. The beast had, a winged lion would have no predators to speak of. It would be something that's very robust, very impenetrable, has now lost its wings. And there's even terms used of being lion-hearted. Anybody who's watched the Wizard of Oz, of course, there was a cowardly lion who, didn't have the heart to, be a lion. And the whole episode that goes about this lion wanting a strong heart. Well, here you see a little bit of this, of the heart that was in this lion that made it strong and robust and fearsome was now being taken away and given a frail heart, a heart of a man who is, maybe not as robust, not as fearful, a more timid. And the whole idea here was, why is this happening? And is this showing that this beast would be given some emotions? And that's kind of what the Jewish sages tend to imply, is that this lion previously that had no compassion, no mercy, would devour everything in its path, was now knocked down a few notches, if you will, and given a frail heart that was showing emotion, showing compassion. We may look at it in, as the word describes it, frail, but yet these are attributes that are desirable in many ways. It depends upon the situation, depends upon what they're being put in, and what the task is at hand of having a compassionate heart and a merciful heart is really a benefit when you're dealing with people. And so this is kind of interesting how this lion was humbled and given a compassionate heart. And then we get to verse 5 here, where there was this other beast, and this one's really interesting. It was a bear, and it said on its side it was raised up. So I think it was like on alongside this lion. But where it gets really interesting is that it had three translated ribs in its mouth and between its teeth. And of course, the picture we had shown you earlier showed a bear with three ribs in its teeth. But again, very, very strange. So let's take a look at this word rib. Um, of course, this word rib is nothing like we really understand the word rib. I don't know how the translators come up with this. I think the curious part here is that in the Aramaic language, we do not have a large volume of dictionary reference. We don't have a large volume of literature to try to determine the meanings. And remember that Aramaic and Hebrew are very word diminished languages. There's about 7,500 words in biblical or classical Hebrew, and so words will have many different meanings, and Aramaic is somewhat the same way. And so here is a word that is pronounced Allah, that means to ascend, to go up, to rise. And it's the same in Hebrew. It means when something ascends. It's often used for describing how the smoke from sacrifices would go up, or described how our prayers would ascend, our prayers would Allah into heaven and rise up in a way. And so right away, this is very, very interesting, saying, well, where did the term rib come from? And so what went through my mind is, let's go back and take a look at another time when there was a word rib that was used that caused some interest, and that is in Genesis chapter 2, verse 21, where God created Eve from Adam and used the word rib. And of course, here the word rib is also very challenged to be defined as a rib. So we see that the word is different. Here it's um, Metzal Otav versus what it was in Daniel with the Allah. So it's a very different spelling, not even close. So as we open this one up, it comes from the word Sela, and it means defined as a rib, a side, a chamber, a plank, a timber. Uh, it's very interesting here because the word has a very ambiguous meaning. It's very difficult to be defined. And so there are many Hebrew teachings by the Hebrew sages that say that Eve was created from the side of Adam, some of them in more of the esoteric or um, the mystical side of Kabbalah will say that God split Adam in half, and one half became Eve. And some of them even feel that Adam had both sexes in him. And so when Adam was split, the feminine qualities of both emotion and physicality were separated from Adam and became Eve. And that's where sometimes we get this term my other half or my soulmates, my missing half, all come down to these kind of thoughts of what really happened when Eve was created. Well, the important part here we see is that the word for that was used for side or rib in Hebrew is not even close to what was used in Aramaic. Another part while we're kind of on this is that the word Sela can also be referred to as a form or shadow. And so when it says that Adam was created in the image of God, it's very similar to the word Selim, which is the word for a shadow, which allows us to think of all the attributes that we embody as a human being that are godly attributes that are not found in other animals upon this earth. The all the emotions and the qualities of what we um, embody in relationships and so forth are all attributes that come from God or part of His shadow. That it's just a beautiful metaphor, beautiful thought. Well, he had these ribs in his mouth, or these objects that are somewhat undefined of what he had in his mouth, and they were between his teeth. And obviously, the purpose here was to say that this bear was a mean creature, and it was going to do much devouring and do a lot of destruction. And it had just things hanging out of his mouth that would be representative of the destruction. And how it comes from the Allah is maybe it has to do with how things were destroyed and the spiritual nature of these different kingdoms and the gods that they called upon and the victories that they tried to um, accomplish were tied into the paganism that they dealt with. I know that was a lot of things to go on. We'll go back to this image here. Here we see the bear with the author of this document or drawing showing the ribs in his mouth. But again, we struggle to understand exactly what was going on here. And I wanted to go back to Daniel chapter 7 and take a look at this meaning of this animal like a bear had reference to the Persian Empire. They claim in the Talmud, which is a dissertation or like an explanation of the Hebrew Bible. It says that the bear was a symbol of the Persian Empire and often used a metaphor of eating and drinking like a bear, basically showing excess and in indulgence. So that's where we're going to stop today. I hope this was obviously it's very challenging and a lot of imagery here. And we will pick up next week. And I hope you hang in there with us as we continue to go through it. All right. Well, God bless all of you. Take care, and we'll see you next week.